Welcome into our Hear Me, See Me podcast. This is a project of WIBW television where we are working all year long to raise awareness of mental health and issues surrounding the conversation of mental health awareness. We're talking about a tough one today, and that is suicide, loss of loved ones to suicide. And the conversation is centering around a family and a story that they certainly hope they would never have to tell, but they are sharing it because it is a very important one. Damon Quigley was only 13 years old when he took his own life. His mom, Brenda, dad, Ron, and his siblings have worked since then to find a purpose in Damon's life, and they have founded Damon's Purpose. Brenda Quigley is with us today to talk about this experience, the journey that you have followed. And I do want to let everyone know, as we're having this conversation, if you see any struggles in yourself or a loved one, please remember the 988 Suicide Prevention Lifeline is there to help you 24/7 if you have anything in your own life that you think you need help right now as you're listening to this today. Because, Brenda, we met before. I shared your story. Gosh, has it been almost 5 years ago now?
3.
Oh,
it was 3, yep.
Time flies. Time flies. And one thing that you shared at that time is that we can't fix what we don't know is broken.
Yes.
So what happened with Damon?
He, it seemed as if it was a normal morning. It was January 19th of 2021. And if we remember back to that day, the world was kind of in crisis with COVID. And the night before, on January 18th, he had been put back into another quarantine for an exposure to COVID. And it was his third one since, I think it was December 1st. And so, looking back on that time myself, I know that everyone, myself included, and a lot of people around me, felt anxious. We all felt anxious, and we all felt like uncertainty in what was happening. And so I imagine that's probably what he felt like, but for whatever reason just chose not to share that with us.
And what type of, before we get into the rest of that day, let's put up Damon's picture so we can look at Damon, forever 13. But what kind of kid was he? What was he involved in? What did he love? What were his passions?
He was a very outgoing boy. Oh my gosh, he loved sports. Baseball was his favorite. He loved all sports. He had the body of a football player, so you would have thought that football was his favorite, but he really loved baseball. Basketball, loved it all. He loved to be outside. He loved the water, loved the lake. We would go fishing and boating, and he loved to be pulled around on a tube. And he had a lot of friends. He was smart, but I'll be honest, he really didn't like to do his homework because, that took up too much time. Right, yeah. So he had a lot of friends. He was very popular. He was kind and very happy. He and I shared a lot of the same interest. We had just recently gotten into doing some woodworking together, and that gave us time to spend together even more when everything was kind of shut down there for a while, and so that was really nice. So
happy, social.
Yep.
No signs, no expression of anything going on.
Not to us. Even like to look back on it, there's things I can think of that, was that a sign? But it just seemed like typical teenage boy behavior, nothing. And we've kind of worked through that and shared some of our thoughts with professionals, and they're like, yeah, really, that's not. He worked probably very hard to not show those signs for whatever reason, I don't know.
Which is why we have these conversations, because
Yes.
we've heard from other folks who we visited with that you do need to check on your well friends, because while we have warning signs that experts talk about, experts also say sometimes there aren't necessarily those warning signs, which is where the conversations need to come in. Regularly check in with your friends who seem well, because you just don't know. So we go to what was the last day of Damon's life. What happened that morning? What was going on as you were leaving for work?
It was I guess I would say it was a normal morning. I'm a registered nurse, and so my life did not shut down during COVID. So I had my regular work schedule, and he was in quarantine, so he had to, he was up before I left. Reminded him, don't forget to get on your Zoom classes today. And he said, he was frustrated with the whole thing, and he said, Mom, if I'm going to be in quarantine again, will you at least stop and pick me up some of the good snacks? And I said, okay, what do you want me to get? And he said, I want some, I think he said Goldfish, Cheez-Its, and Gatorade. And so, I mean, we had plans for that evening.
Exactly.
We had plans. He told me a couple of things he wanted to do with me when we got home. I was like, yeah, as soon as I get home, wait till I get home, we'll do that together, And so we had plans, and I gave him a hug and a kiss and told him I loved him, and he had had this curly hair on top that he had grown out. We didn't know he had natural curly hair and, until COVID, and we didn't get haircuts. And I just remember ruffling his curls and being like, okay, we'll see you tonight. I love you, and don't forget to do your schoolwork. And it was just a normal day.
And he said, I love you too.
Yeah, love you too. Yeah.
And again, when we talk about warning signs, sometimes it's that they withdraw, they don't want their favorite things, they aren't planning for the future. He was planning for that day, for that evening when you came home. So
I have done, being a nurse, I feel like I'm a lifelong learner. And so I had to know, I had to learn, I had to read, and I read and I researched about suicide, and I came across a quote that I feel like embodies what I believe was going on. And these aren't my words, Ben, I don't know who said them, but it was, suicide is oftentimes an impulsive decision made in a moment of crisis. That, I think, could not explain it more. An impulsive decision. I mean, you look up the word impulsive, and a 13-year-old boy's picture is going to be beside the word impulsive, made in a moment of crisis. And I believe that Damon probably felt like, the whole world was in crisis, and he probably felt like his world was in crisis. And maybe he didn't know how to say it. Maybe he didn't want to disappoint us. I really don't know. I won't ever know. And I did have someone who had lost a family member to suicide, and she said, one of the things you're going to have to learn is to stop asking why, because even if you had a list of his whys, it wouldn't make sense. It just wouldn't make sense to you because your brain is not feeling the way his did in that moment.
And you're right. Think about the teenage brain. As adults, we can rationalize this too will pass. This moment will pass. Things will get better. Maybe not in an hour, maybe not tomorrow, but we know things will get better. We'll find our way. A 13-year-old doesn't necessarily, or a 15-year-old, or a 16-year-old, or a 22-year-old doesn't necessarily have that capacity yet.
No. And, a lot of adults during that time struggled. As a nurse, I saw that. We dealt with a lot of people who had never faced anxiety or never had depression, but in those moments during COVID and during quarantine and lockdown, a lot of us shared feelings that we never had before. And so I don't think we can completely understand the impact that those moments had on us and what was happening to not just even teenagers and kids, but to adults as well.
As that day went on, when did you realize something was wrong?
Ron had called me and said, I haven't been able to get a hold of Damon today. And I said, well, that doesn't surprise me. His classes are over, and he's probably got his headset on playing his Xbox, or PlayStation. And so I had called my parents and said, well, will you go over and just check on him? And my dad found him.
But that's not the end of the story. It may have been the end of Damon's life on Earth, but it certainly isn't the end of the story.
It was not.
After the initial shock, how long did it take your family, because he has two siblings, right, a brother and a sister, you have 3 children, what were those conversations like in your own family as you processed the shock that I imagine you were going through that day?
Yes. We realized a lot of things about ourselves, that how similar we are in some areas of our lives, but how different we were, and how different people process grief differently. And so we got into therapy right away as a family to realize what was healthy and how it was healthy to grieve together and how we can support each other. So that was very important. But I think I would be remiss if I didn't mention that I don't think we would be here today sharing the story and grieving as healthy as you can without the community support that we had.
You're from a small town.
Yes.
And like Corning, go through 3 streets and you're done.
Yeah. Yes. It's the best little town. Yes. But yeah, and so I grew up there, and I know everybody, and everybody knew Damon. And Ron and I have done a lot of, been to a lot of places and talked to a lot of people who have lost a family member to suicide. And one of the things that we were kind of shocked to find out is that the support and encouragement we received is not typical all the time. That people don't know what to say or they don't know what to do, and so it's easier to avoid going and supporting the family. But what we found, and I'm not talking about just Corning, we're so unique in where we live that we're just made up of a bunch of little towns, and we all know each other. And so our family, our community, our friends, they showed up in droves, and they supported us. And if that had not happened, I mean, I don't know if I would feel comfortable sharing our story, but there's a part of me that feels like people thought, if it could happen to Damon, could it happen to them? And I knew right away we could not let that happen, that I did not want any other family or to go through it. But more than that, I didn't want any other child to feel, or person, I should say, adults too, to feel that they couldn't share those feelings, that they couldn't ask for help. And so that really was my driving force.
And it was a very, very bold, very public first step you all took. It was in Damon's obituary.
It was, yes.
What did you write, and why did you decide to include that?
I think that looking back, I think there's times in our lives that we look back and we don't realize the impact of a moment. And I sat down the day after Damon died. I very clearly remember sitting at my mom and dad's kitchen table, and my sister was sitting beside me, and my laptop was in front, and I'm starting to write his obituary, and that's a horrific moment.
Right.
That's horrific. And I said, do you think it's okay? I asked Ron and the kids, is it okay to say that he died by suicide? And I didn't realize the impact of that question, where that would lead us. And they said, yeah, why would you not? That's what happened. Everybody knows that's what happened. And so we did, and I think by doing that, it kind of, it brought out into the light things that we like to keep in the dark. Like, we don't like to talk about it. We don't like to face those things sometimes. But in that moment, bringing that out into the light, people that weren't from our community and didn't know us, they began to reach out and to support us and share their stories. And so we didn't feel alone, like we talked about earlier. You don't want to feel alone, and we didn't feel alone, and we knew we weren't.
You maybe didn't even realize how much that was.
No.
Just bashing down the door, kicking that stigma away, because that's what it's about. I mean, what is the danger of, what would have been the danger of not acknowledging it, of not being public about it? What would that have in your mind perpetuated?
I think that it would have sent a message to Damon's friends that we shouldn't talk about it, and we shouldn't acknowledge our feelings, and we shouldn't deal with grief, number one, and we shouldn't deal with the thoughts that we have, the negative self-talk that we have. I think it just would have perpetuated that. And I can say personally, I don't know where I would be at in my grief journey if I wasn't able to talk about it, because coming here today, sharing his story, those things all, oddly enough, are healing for me to be able to talk.
It turned out the school superintendent at the time was one of your neighbors.
Yes.
And so what was the reaction from the school, and how did they react to maybe how you wanted it handled? Because there is a discussion in the education community. How much do we acknowledge when a child has taken their own life, a student has taken their own life? Does it put other students at risk if we pay too much attention to it? What happens if we don't pay enough attention to it? What did the school community do for you and for Damon's classmates?
They were wonderful. So they were there that night. They showed up that night. They said, we had no idea. We've contacted everybody. There was no signs from teachers or people that he was with. How can we support you? Basically, is the thoughts or the feelings that we got. And they allowed his classmates to have T-shirts made to wear to the funeral, and to have us have one. And they allowed them to get together and to talk through their feelings. And I guess I can't emphasize enough that I can't imagine what those conversations looked like within the school. Like, we don't want to hurt the Quigley's feelings, but we have to take care of our students. And they had a wonderful balance of, what's best for the students, and allow them to share their grief, but, keep moving forward. And it was very important for me to be able to talk to his friends and classmates and let them know that no matter how it ended, it wasn't their fault. Like, even if they could look back and think, oh, he said one time, that's not your fault. You're a child, and that is not we just needed to clear that up right away. And the school has allowed me to come in and talk and teach a class now, fast forward, and they were fantastic. In fact, so this year in January was 3 years since he passed away. And, Ron and I had decided after 3 years, we weren't going to maybe make a big deal about it, but we were going to go away for the weekend. And a couple days before, one of our cheerleaders said, hey, we have a game that night, and we would like our student section theme to be Damon's purpose.
Oh, cool.
So the girls basketball team wore the Damon's shirts for their warm-ups that night, and there was a ton of kids wearing, we've sold lots of different shirts through the years, and there was lots of them.
I like that one, Tomorrow Needs You.
This is my new favorite, yes. And that night, so the girls played first, and they were both close games, and toward the end of the game, I looked up and the score was 42-42. Which I have to explain the significance. That was Damon's favorite number. That was his jersey numbers for all of his sports. And I thought, oh my gosh, what a wonderful thing. And of course the kids noticed it too. And then during the boys' game, I looked up and the score was 42-42. So and then the kids were, they sent me messages and pictures of the scoreboards, which
it's like the pennies from heaven.
It was, and I just thought, oh, thanks for that. Like I needed that, and maybe the school needed that, and just needed that encouragement too.
And another way that the school allowed the students to express themselves in a way that the students felt was appropriate and that they wanted. Yeah. And you said fast forward, because there was this journey in between. Yes. When did Damon's purpose start?
Probably a few months after he died. I guess I said they were grieving mom post on Facebook, and honestly, what it was things I wasn't given the chance to say to Damon. It was those words of encouragement or positive messages, or it's okay to not be okay, just don't suffer silently kind of messages. And so I don't know how other people get through their grief, but I did spend a lot of time just asking God why, and I believe that every life has purpose. And so what now was the purpose of Damon's life that he was gone? What was the purpose of the manner of his death? What was my purpose now? And that word kind of kept coming back to me. And so I think I asked my daughter, do you think it's okay if I hashtag Damon's purpose? And I think she probably rolled her eyes at me because, but
because teenagers.
Because teenagers. And so I did. And I thought, oh, I wonder how people are going to take this. And it was like people, my friends and family, they all kind of picked up on it. And so it started with just a hashtag Damon's purpose, because there has to be a purpose in the pain.
And that's about the time that we met you.
Yeah.
And when we rolled up into Corning,
yes,
there were signs all around town. Mm-hmm. What was the kind of floodgate that opened when you started doing that?
So a friend of mine had told me about a lady she had heard about who had a lot of mental health challenges in her community, and she decided to put up messages in her town with positive just sayings and quotes and things. And she said, what do you think? Do you think we can do this? And I was like, yeah, we can do this. So we decided to have a sign party. That's what we called it, a sign party. We had to stay, I like to stay positive. So it was a sign party, and I said, well, maybe 10 people will show up. And so we'll just have it at my house. Well, many more than 10 people showed up. And it was, what I found interesting was you expect moms to be there. Mm-hmm. And so moms were there, but it was grandparents, it was dads, it was teenagers, it was a lot of people. And I kind of felt like that was a very healing moment, that we could tell stories. And I heard stories about him that, oh, do you want to hear the real story of what happened that day? And, we laughed, and we really laughed. And I think it was good for everybody to see that it's okay to heal. It's okay to keep those memories with you, and but heal also, and find that laughter.
How has Damon's purpose grown since then? Because this message has spread beyond Corning, beyond Centralia. Mm-hmm. And we should point out, when we talk about school, there's a staircase in the school now that has some of those positive messages on, which is super cool. How has it grown beyond just your own corner of the world?
So 2 years ago, I had heard about a program called Teen Mental Health First Aid. I work for Community Healthcare Systems out of Onega, and we were offering classes for adults called Youth Mental Health First Aid and Adult Mental Health First Aid. Both of those classes are taught to adults. And there was, I guess you could say, an offshoot of it called Teen Mental Health First Aid, and it is actually going into the classroom and teaching teenagers how to recognize, respond, and understand mental health challenges and crises. And I guess you could say it was a God moment when I'd been thinking about that, and my daughter said, you know, I really think we need this, some kind of mental health training for our teenagers. And so I went to our mental health task force and I said, I really want to do this. And there was no hesitancy. They just said, yep, let's make it work. And so there's two colleagues of mine now, colleagues and friends, who we go into the classrooms and we have taught. It's 6 45-minute classes, and we've taught 7 of those. So we've been in the classroom a total of 42 times as of now. And we've gotten some really good feedback from the kids who take the class.
What are you hearing from the kids, and what have you learned from them?
They want to talk. Like these issues are things that are very common. When we talk about statistics, like 1 in 5 teenagers will have a mental health challenge or crisis this year. That does not surprise them. In fact, they think the numbers may be higher. But on the other hand, they don't want to feel alone. We also know that research tells us if a teen is having a mental health challenge or crisis, they're more likely to reach out to another teen first. And so this class helps teens to decide where and when to find that help. And so they are actually very, for the most part, they are very open to listening and learning. And we've actually had some that have taken the class that have, messaged us and said, we actually did use some of those things that we learned because we had this incident. And so that is a good thing that they're paying attention and they're learning, but they're well aware of what's happening to themselves and their friends, and it doesn't surprise them.
What message do you try to leave with them? And what can teens do? Because like you said, you had to make sure Damon's friends knew it wasn't their fault. There was nothing that they could have done to intervene, nothing that they should have spotted, because that's always hindsight 2020, woulda, coulda, shoulda. What do you make sure they know? What do you tell them?
The class teaches how and when to get help. And one of the most common questions I get asked is, how do I know when I need to reach out for an adult? And so my standard answer to that is, if you have that thought, if you wonder, is it time to get an adult involved? The answer is always yes. And let an adult make that decision, or a professional to make that decision if they need help.
How do teens react to that, though? Because I would think on one hand they'd be like, yeah, sure, it's going to make my friend mad.
Yeah.
Do they buy into it?
So it kind of, the funny thing is that when we go to like Centralia and Damon's friends and the people that have been affected by it, there's really no hesitancy. Like, yeah, I'd rather have a mad friend who's alive than a friend I wish I would have spoke up for. Or even a hurting friend, not that even has to get to the point that someone does die by suicide, just someone who's hurting. You don't want to see your friend in that pain. And so more receptive than what you would think. I think that stigmas are more for our generation than the younger. Like they're ready to talk about it. And so it might be our biases that we've had that makes it harder. Because one of the things that we talk about is, and I don't know if you remember, there was this old-fashioned almost thought that you don't ask somebody if they're thinking about suicide.
The word that put the thought in their head.
Might put their, And we know now that that's not true at all. You can't put suicide into somebody's head that's not already thinking about it. And so one of the lessons that we teach is that you can and you should ask those hard questions. And so it is okay to say, are you thinking about suicide? Are you thinking about killing yourself? And those are very hard words to say. And so we talk about the importance of that, because it gives your friend permission to answer honestly. And it also tells them that you care enough about them to ask that hard question.
What should adults know? What have you learned? What do you impart to other parents?
I would say the biggest thing is that if your child is struggling, if your family member is struggling, you're not alone. Research is telling us that it's very common to have a mental health challenge or crisis. In fact, much more common than I think we think that it is, that there's help out there. But more than anything, two words I feel like I talk about a lot. One is hope. Hope. That there's always hope. That things will get better. But resiliency, because just when we talk about a teenager's brain is not fully developed until they're in their 20s, we're also very resilient at that age too. We can learn coping mechanisms. We can learn how to be resilient. We can be taught those things. And so hope and resiliency are two big things for me.
The hashtag, it's okay to not be okay. I mean, there's a pop group that wrote it with the name, and I'm like, yay! I mean,
yeah,
not
great.
necessarily because of you, but I like them. It's because of you. But how important is that? I mean, and I was wearing it on my wrist until my cat ate my bracelet, but
I brought you a new one.
Thank you. But how important is that message? I mean, and to leave that message with everyone. What does it mean to say it's okay to not be okay, and why do we need to take that message to heart?
I think, first of all, it tells us that you're not alone. Like, it's okay if you're not okay. Everybody has a day or maybe longer when they're not okay, and that's okay. It's just not okay to suffer silently. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay that you can find the words to say, today's not a good day, or yesterday, or this week, or this month, it's not been good. And it's okay to say those words and know that there's hope that it's going to get better, but it's also okay to ask for help to get to that point where it's better.
Have you had any young people reach out and say that this hearing from you was the push they needed to speak up?
I have. Several, I have people that reach out to me, not as frequently as in the beginning, but I mean, still pretty frequently. It would be surprising how many people do reach out to me. But I have had people say, I thought about what you taught me, or I thought about what I heard or I saw. And I suppose if there's one thing people take away, I hope it's just that they remember Damon's mom saying, I wish he would have told me. I wish I would have been given the chance. One of the things I said like over and over after he died was, I would have walked to the ends of the earth to get him help if I just had known. And so that's what I hope people know, is that they're really, no matter what your brain is telling you, there are people out there who would walk to the ends of the earth.
One moment. One moment. And yeah, it's okay to not be okay. We can't fix what we don't know is broken.
Right.
We can't help what we don't know, and we can't heal what we don't know is hurting. And that's what Damon's Purpose is all about.
Yes.
Is the Facebook page the best way to get in touch with you, Brenda?
Facebook page, and I was recently told by, I love talking to teenagers, and I was recently told that Facebook is for old ladies, which hurt my heart a little bit, but they told me to start an Instagram page. So we do have an Instagram page too, but I'm not as
Just
good
wait
at
till your
that.
daughter starts TikTok.
Yeah.
Get the TikTok page out there.
No.
So you can find Damon's Purpose on Facebook and check out Instagram. It's wonderful to hear your story. I wish I didn't have to hear your story. It's wonderful to know that people are there and are willing to listen. And if you need someone to listen, again, that 988 suicide crisis line is there for you 24/7. We have a whole lot more resources on WIBW.com/hearmesee me, because this story is part of what we're trying to impart. And that is that we do hear you, we do see you, and there's always hope. Brenda, thank you. Thank you all for listening.